Hello, I'm Shawn Hudson. We're here gonna with our podcast for group dynamics, and we're gonna be talking about female wrestling. Uh, I've been a wrestling coach for 20 plus years. I've wrestled for over 40 years. And we always had female wrestlers that wrestled co-ed, but now this is turning into a real push, the last more than 10 years for individual female wrestling. So it's real exciting.
Hi, and I'm Brooke. I'll be on this podcast as well. I've been in collegiate coaching with women's wrestling for about 4 years now, and I've wrestled for not 40 years, but just about my entire middle school, high school, and collegiate career, as well as some at the senior level. So I'd say we both are pretty qualified to talk about the growth of women's wrestling, especially with how long you've been coaching. You've probably just seen it boom. Like I grew
Yeah.
up with it. I was on an all men's team growing up. And then you get to college and it's like, bam, there's girls everywhere wrestling.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's been a struggle for me as far as getting girls on the team. Like I don't know what it is. Maybe it's just like that's interesting, like how they perceive me, or what it is. I get girls to come to the interest meeting, but not like come out. Like I've had the most I've ever had is like five girls on my team. Currently now I have one. And so it's group dynamics, it's directly related to it. What are we looking at here? So
So I
um
know like we discussed chapter 16. So chapter in 16 talks about social support. And the article we found through Russell Like a Girl kind of also talks about how like they correlate the growth with social support. So do you think like there's any sort of support barrier that your school currently has that might be deteriorating females, or is there like another women's sport that might just be a little bit more appealing?
I think yeah, like for sure, like my demographic of my school is not really, the profile of a wrestler as far as like they're affluent. There's a lot of fluent, like wealthy, entitled kids. And I think that, even in wrestling, it's even for boys wrestling, they kind of it's like kind of like the redheaded stepchild in my school. It's football, baseball, for girls it's basketball,
Yeah.
softball.
Um,
So
well, the definition for social support is knowing that one is loved and that others will do all they can when a problem arises. And like, I feel like women's wrestling fits that definition. Like, you go to a women's wrestling tournament and girl's hair bow breaks, and all of a sudden there's like 10 girls offering her a hair bow, and there's just so much support. Um, for example, I met with the Liberty coaches yesterday for women's wrestling, and I was telling them about some of our dilemmas, and they basically were like, well, we can fix all of them. So they've invited all of our female athletes to come and be a part of their club until our season next year so they can at least be on the mats and have some sort of mat time.
yeah.
And we were kind of talking about the men's side if they'd be interested in doing that. And I was like, well, men don't really do that. Like, I just don't think that that's something going into another college room and practicing with the enemy or competition is something that you'd really see in men's wrestling.
Yeah. Well, it actually, it's funny you say that, because when I started coaching, like after our district tournament, we would have regional practice, we'd have state practice where we'd practice with the kids that like made it to those levels. And that just for some reason the last, probably 10, 12 years, that stopped. Like people just are like, oh no, we'll just practice on our own kind of thing. So I thought it was great. Like for me, like I love the growth of the female because of that. But like it reminds me of, years ago, wrestling is changing. Boys wrestling is changing to be more competitive. Girls is changing, as in like it's starting, it's growing. It's like we're men's wrestling was, 20 years ago, 25, 30 years ago or whatever. Everybody is not out for themselves. They're out to improve. I think the social support is huge with each other, like even at tournaments and things like that. Like I have one girl, she will talk to all the girls, they'll talk, and like it's like a real social event there.
Like once
Um,
they get on the team, it's just another story. Like they'll do movie nights and it's braiding hair the day before tournaments. And like they do so much together that like with being around men's teams, like I've never seen men's teams really do that. Like men's teams aren't doing sleepovers the night before a tournament and playing with each other's hair and talking and like it's just a great time for them.
I do see the bonding, the talking. It's just done in different ways, like last year at States, it's at Virginia Beach, so we're in a hotel room on the beach, and they're all running around playing like I don't know what they're doing, but they're yeah, like the kids that had to wrestle, the kids that were just there to support, like they're all running around, running in the water, like acting. It was real good to see. It's a bonding thing. So I think it depends on the team, but yeah, it's definitely not to the level of the female athletes that I've seen. So
So like
um
on the support aspect, I'd even take that a step further and say like at least when I was in college, when we would go to tournaments, if there was other teams in the hotel with us, we'd all sit in the lobby and hang out with the other teams. Like I don't
um
know if like your boys teams will take it like that far, but like that was very
they,
common.
well they will for like more like people they know, like if it was Marshall, like a high school down the road or Oakton, they know those kids. They because of our the way our youth programs are, like they all know each other. They play
Exactly.
together, they wrestled against each other. So now they're going to different schools, but they still have that connection and friendship. So they will, depending on if they know them or not. If they don't know them, then that's not going to happen. It's not a let's strike up a conversation and hang out with these people. No, it doesn't happen.
But yeah, I remember like women's wrestling used to be so small that like you were on a national team, you knew every girl on every national team in the country. Like my first year
Yeah.
in Fargo, there was only like maybe 100 to 120 girls there. So it's like we all knew each other. When like you sit in them crowded lines for weigh-ins and everything, like you got to do something. So it was very common for us to kind of, and at the time, women were like the ugly stepchild of the wrestling community. Like we were just kind of like, oh, so a lot of states wouldn't even house their female athletes when they'd travel. So a lot of the states would get together and put all the girls. I remember my very first year in Fargo, I think it was about maybe 2010. Um, and I had to room with Virginia, and it was me or North Carolina, Virginia, and I think Tennessee. We essentially had one coach for all three states. But whenever you would get on that winning track, all of a sudden coaches from your state would show up. So it was like the support wasn't there until like it was there, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Everybody likes a winner. So like looking at the social support and stuff we talked about in chapter 13 of the social psychology beliefs, efficacies, beliefs, So um I feel like even since I've been involved with female wrestling, the past I guess 10 years, like I really haven't had any female wrestlers besides that. Um it's changed a lot on their confidence level and their skill level and uh I believe that like the social support is really the acceptance, the wrestle like a girl, this social media, how great this is changing the perspective of not only the female athletes for self-efficacy, right? They're thinking, I can do this. I'm confident in this. I've worked at this. I've done everything the boys have done. And then the at the same time, the belief of the boys in the girl wrestlers.
Yeah,
Like
absolutely. Like it's not
uh
uncommon at the NCAA tournament to see them walking around with the Bridge Divide shirts on that on the back say Grow Women's Wrestling.
Yeah. It's definitely come out. So like I see belief, uh, efficacy in coaches and other athletes. I did a little survey of probably about 15 female athletes. It's the best I could do with, what we had. So our area is doing like a little female women's practice for all the girls that want to wrestle in the girls' states next weekend, not this weekend, but the following weekend. So they're having a group workout. So there was only a handful of girls there, but um, overall, their observations were positive as far as like how they saw themselves and how they thought everyone else saw them. Like so, it was like a number of them were like, I, some of them were like, the boys don't even pay attention to me. Some of them were like, the boys, respect my hard work and they see that I'm there and serious. Um, and some were like the coaches were pretty much unanimous that the coaches treat them better than they treat the boy wrestlers. So I don't know what that's about. So
When you done this survey, did you have like any sort of negative feedback from any of the girls?
there was like because one of the questions was like, would you rather like have a boy or girl coach? Because in our conversations you had mentioned that like a lot of girls will be like, oh, I want boy coaches because they know the sport better. So that was like a perception that the female coaches don't know as much as the boys, which I think is not, at least it may have been that way at one time, but I don't think it's that way anymore. Like
That's
I feel
awesome to
like
hear, though.
yeah, yeah. So a lot of the girls were like, no, it doesn't matter to me, boy or girl, doesn't matter, doesn't matter. I think there was like one girl that said, something like maybe the boy coach would know more technique or something, but that's just probably looking at like where they are in their development. So more than a reflection on the coach.
Was she more like of a developed wrestler, would you say?
Yeah, she was probably a newer wrestler.
Okay.
So just starting out. And the thing with wrestling is self-efficacy is huge with wrestling. So the fact that the social support, the coaching, everybody, the boys, like everything is like giving girls more self-confidence in, yeah, I can do this. Like I read a study of co-ed PE classes in Turkey, which is of course Turkey is like their ideals are different than ours in America. So it was very um it leaned towards more what 1950s kind of thought was, girls do these sports, boys do these sports, and that thought was in the study reading it. If I can find it, I'll reference it. But basically saying um that they the PE teachers that were teaching it, whether it was male or female, had the same attitude. Like girls should be doing this, boys should be doing this. Boys are rowdy, girls are prim and proper. And then that transferred right into the boys and girl students that, this is what so that social support kind of dispels that is what I'm saying. Like that thinking is not really it may be happening at a small level or some places, but it's really changing that thinking about female wrestlers and
Well, and
what
like
they can.
when you like bring up the idea of social support, you also got to bring up like the topic of, let's just say, movies. Like I don't know if you remember, like maybe it was 2017 they came out with that movie with the two Indian wrestlers. Wasn't in English, good movie, but like it was just about these two Indian wrestlers. I think it was on Netflix maybe. It's called like Dongle.
Well,
but they were both like world-class wrestlers from India, and they were like the first like two big female wrestlers to really come out of India. You've got a movie about them too, and then you've got the Helen Morales movie. I think Flow Wrestling's done a couple short films on some really good high school wrestlers. Helen Morales also had that film regarding her head injury. So there's a lot of media getting pushed out about women's wrestling that like we didn't really see before that the men were kind of getting. So now like we're getting just as much, if not more, I'd say media attention in that sense, like the
yeah,
movies and the films and the interviews.
for sure. The study I was referring to was the I just didn't want to gender interactions in co-ed physical education. A study in Turkey by Canon Coca. So I don't know. I just got this in a periodical. It was in the periodical Adolescence, volume 44. But yeah, so I just thought that was interesting. That was 2009, so is when
Which
that
that's not
article
too
came
long
out.
ago.
So but like I said, like different countries will have different beliefs about this, and so it just kind of showed that bias. And I think that, like you're saying, all this attention all is kind of changing that perception uh for society and for the girls, so hopefully that translates. I mean, obviously it has. Like how do the statistics, it's grown, it's gone, like you said, it's blown up as a sport. So
I mean, back to like the social part of it, we could also see like the bad in it too. Um, I know I'd say about 5, 10 years ago, there was such a big push for female officials that they were fast tracking officials through like the upgrade process just to get them on like the higher stage to show like the growth. Well, a lot of them got to that stage and they couldn't handle it because they weren't properly trained and it was
yeah.
just a fail.
Well, yeah, it takes a lot. Like even now, I've been involved with wrestling for over 40 years, right? But I still like I can ref. I think I can ref. I could ref. I have refed, but that is a different level. Like, and the rules are changing, and perception, like like how you see things is different, and that's something you need experience for. You can't just jump into that. So
Well, and definitely like when you look at like freestyles, like the main style women wrestle, like our rules change every year.
yeah,
And then they
which is
drastically
crazy.
change every Olympic cycle. So it's like
So
yeah.
are the rules different for boys and girls
For
in
freestyle,
freestyle, or are they
um,
the same rules?
they vary. Um, there are some things that men are allowed to do that women are not. So for example, men are after that are above the junior level can do full Nelsons.
Uh,
Women at no level can do a full.
uh,
Men can do the Iron Cross is now legal. Um, women cannot sit out with double arm bars, and men can.
uh,
So it's
hmm,
like little things like that, but it kind of
yeah,
goes to like the differences between men and women. Kind of the same concept back, which it's no longer a rule now, but I'd say about 4 or 5 years ago, schoolboys and below weren't allowed to go straight back with the suplex. They had to take it to a side, which that
uh,
wasn't for the wrestler being thrown. It was for the younger one because their necks weren't developed enough to handle that kind of pressure.
yeah,
Same concept with women. Women naturally don't have as strong of necks. So kind of like when we talked about the Russell like a girl study,
yeah,
women don't have strong necks, so that's why you don't want to teach explosive technique. Um,
yeah.
so that's why you can't do.
Is that's just genetics, or is that like something that just like boys? Well, obviously boys have more muscle, but is
Um,
it the structure of the neck, or is it just muscle, pure muscle?
I think it's a little bit of both. I know you had kind of mentioned it a little with the knees, but I've got the study pulled up. Let's see what it is.
I mean,
It's
I
rising
think
trends in wrestling associated injuries in females. persisting to US emergency departments, and like the biggest ones were heads, head and neck, shoulders, and knees. More like the biggest injuries among females. And I think with men, it was labrums. Um, they didn't have as labrums, shoulders, and knees. Their heads and necks weren't really at their top of their list.
Yeah. Hmm. So, um, so you've been wrestling a long time. So you were wrestling with boys. How did the boys perceive you when you were wrestling?
Um,
I mean, were they supportive? Or was it like a thing where you like, did it affect your confidence with how they saw you?
so my club teammates, all the support in the world. Like they truly believed I could do everything. They would show up at like tournaments and like they were the ones cheering me on that side. My high school teammates, like that's where like the support wasn't there. They were very farm boys that didn't really think women should be wrestling yet. Had such a weird mindset, but it was such a weird dynamic at meets when like you'd have like some of the top wrestlers from the country, because we know like kids who wrestle club typically do better than kids who don't. Well, we only
Hmm.
had two kids on my high school team who wrestled club, and I was one of them. So we had that where like I had some of the best kids in the state cheering me on in the finals, and then my teammates were just kind of whatever.
Yeah.
So I will
So,
say, like, I do enjoy seeing like the support that girls are now getting, because a lot of us like 10 years ago weren't getting that kind of support.
yeah. And we like going back to what we said in the beginning, it's because of the social support, like just like overall in general, everybody, um, it changes perceptions on, and then when you have that change in perception, then it trickles right to the coaches, to the wrestlers. So
So you're more on the coaching scene now. Do you see any like backlash from any coaches regarding women's wrestling? Like, or have you seen that in the last couple of years where like coaches are just annoyed that they have to do anything with the girls or anything like that?
mm, so here's the thing. So in my county, it's co-ed. So when they were like, "Oh, we were all for it, support, right? Great. But we're not getting supported financially. When I know we're not here for the money, but at the same time, when you're doing all this extra work and not getting compensated for it, you already get paid pennies an hour. You know what I mean? So then they added girls wrestling. That's the only thing. Like we do it. It's like no problem. But now you have to make another schedule. You have to try and get those girl only events. Whereas before it was like they would wrestle boys or they didn't wrestle, right? So now that they're growing, you have girl events that so you have to make a new schedule. You have to practice, they practice with you, but if they have to go to an event and you have to schedule like what coach is going with them, who's going to do this, who's going to do that kind of. So it's just a little bit extra work, but it's like a whole another job. Like I tried to hire a female coach because I thought that that would be maybe one of the things why I couldn't get female wrestlers because they might be more comfortable with a female athlete in there, and I couldn't get one. Like because there's not that many, and those that are interested in coaching are going to more the collegiate level, right? So they're not in high school, and if they are in high school, it's like for a short period of time, and then they're going up because of that's just the way it works when you have the growth you have, right? So, um, but overall, very supportive. Like the coaching that I interact with are like just as gung ho about the girls as they are the boys. So,
So with like that dynamic, do you see like any resentment from any of your athletes when like you have to do like this divide? Because essentially you are doing two jobs for the price of one. Um, looking at social support, do you think like when women's wrestling is officially sanctioned by VSHA that you'll get compensated like two coaches, or do you think the like made it work
I
for
think
so long that
no, I think they have to, like for equity standpoint, like Title IX, like once it becomes a official varsity sport, because right now they're able to do that because it's not official. It's we're in what do they call it? I forget what they call it, but it's like basically probationary period. So that ends this year. So next year they're gonna have to have like just like girls and boys basketball. It's got to be separate, because that's equity,
yeah, do you
So
think there's gonna be any like ethical issues with coaches when like they kind of have to pick because like it's gonna be, hey, we gotta hire a new coach. You think any coaches are gonna be kind of negligent to give up their female athletes or like at least like their good female athletes?
so I think that they understand that this is for them. Like I mean, wrestling coaches aren't, well, at least the ones I know, they're not selfish when it comes to that. That's going to be like
Yeah,
they're
it's
going to
about
do
the
everything they
kid.
can. Huh?
It's about the
Sorry.
kid. It's not about
It's
us.
about the kid, yeah. So I don't think there's going to be any backlash. You might have some male coaches that go, all right, well, I'm going to be the women's coach and we need to hire a men's coach, or one of their assistants will step up as the men's coach and they'll be the female coach. It might go that way, you know.
You think there will be a
Uh,
lot of like male coaches currently that say like they'd rather be with the women?
uh, I wouldn't say a lot, but I think there will definitely be some. Mm, Um,
Do you think
and
it's definitely, oh, sorry, go ahead.
it's not because like men or women are better. It's a lot of times it's comfort level, like comfort level, I think. So like I'm personally looking to not to like in the next 5 years, like I got 10 years till retirement. I'm not going to coach all the way up to retirement probably. That would be something I would do. I would like train somebody to be the boys coach and then take over the girls program, like because it would be probably right now, at least at our school, it's less girls, like more smaller, like not I can't think of what I'm trying to say here, but just I don't know, more I want to say intimate, like one-on-ones and like more, like whereas now I got like 70 kids and I'm like trying to figure out who's going where and what's happening and like, it's just a lot more hectic. I feel like it'd be a lot more less stressful to organize and do the girls program. But
Definitely.
you
And it's a
probably
lot
can tell
easier to
me that.
grow when you have more coaches too, like that can adequately provide like the time and the support that the kids need.
Yeah. So Uh, I hope we covered like recapping. So what we focused on was like just the social support of women's wrestling is what has made it grown, and changed the viewpoints of our communities. Like that women can wrestle, and then that trickles down to that the female wrestlers and female athletes think they can do it, and that's it's perpetuating each other, like the support, and that is creating the self-efficacy, and then they are in turn getting better, and then it just kind of like keeps going, right?
Yeah, especially like their confidence levels go up, the support goes up. It's just like an all around, it's very empowering, I guess you could say.
Awesome. So how's your program coming? I
Uh,
mean, we can stop that. I think we've done 30 minutes.
yeah, I started